everybody. I'm Alyssa from Meditative Astrology, and I'm here to talk to you about the astrology of the second week of June, looking at June 8th through 14th. This week is a bit more dynamic than last week. Last week we talked about a lot of flowing energy. We have quite a few aspects to talk about this week here. So before we do, reminder to like, follow, subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel so that way you don't miss anything that we have going on here. We have these weekly videos that come out every Saturday, as well as live meditations Sunday nights. So make sure you don't miss any of that. We start out on Sunday, June 8th this week with the moon in the sign of Scorpio. And right away at the beginning of the week, we have Mercury making a conjunction to Jupiter at 29 degrees of Gemini. The exact conjunction between these two planets comes into play about 4 p.m. Eastern time. I don't usually lay out the times for planetary transits, but Mercury's moving quick and makes a lot of aspects this week. So just kind of pointing out the time frames here. So it's all day, but the exact time is right about 4 o'clock. And that's Eastern time, always Eastern time here. And this conjunction is just days before Mercury becomes visible as the evening star. Mercury has just recently went through cazimi with the sun, that conjunction with the sun and the resetting point where it switched from morning star to evening star. So when a planet becomes visible in the evenings in the sky where we can see it again, that is where it is said to gain most of its power and strength and to be within its own, to be a little bit more within its own energy. And then this conjunction is happening at 29 degrees. So it's the last degree of the sign, it's the anaretic degree, and Mercury has just recently went through the cazimi, is becoming visible in the sky. Both planets are going to be changing sign here. All of these are little points that point to cycles that are culminating here. Jupiter is about to enter Cancer, the place of its exaltation, so that is the next best place for the planet to be. Other than its own home sign where it rules, traditionally speaking. So this feels like a nice, helpful send-off to both planets. Last week we talked about a helpful aspect from Venus to Jupiter, so now this week, right at the culmination in 29 degrees, we have Mercury coming into contact with Jupiter as well. So to me, it's almost as if Mercury is seeing Jupiter through this transition to a more helpful place. We have Jupiter going from Gemini, where it's considered to be in its detriment, to Cancer, where it's considered to be exalted here. You know, it's kind of like Mercury has been in the temple of details, riddles, information, lots of questioning, lots of asking why. And now Jupiter is moving on to the place of birth, the place of proliferation of life. It's a place where a comfort is created, so things can expand and can grow from there. That's a lot of what Jupiter likes to do. It likes to create a place to expand and to grow. Gemini is much more about contraction and looking at the small details, even though it's very social, very communicative, and very much likes to communicate with others. A lot of that is because it's wanting to fully understand the small little details compared to the Jupiter signs of Sagittarius and Pisces, which are a little bit more big picture or taking everything in all at one time. So these two planets coming together here, expansion of ideas, beneficial communication. You know, what else do these two planets have to say in the sign of Gemini? Jupiter is finishing up a year-long trek there. Mercury is in its own sign in Gemini, so they can communicate very, very well here. And what else is there left to say? What other lessons do you still have to ponder and to contemplate on here in these last couple days? How can you reflect on what Jupiter has brought you in the sign of Gemini? What kind of information has come to you? What have you learned? How has your communication changed? Or maybe has there been either an increase or decrease in communication in any aspects of your life? These are all things to think about as Mercury, the planet of our mind, thoughts, communications, perceptions, comes into contact with Jupiter just within its last day here of being in the sign of Gemini here. You know, guaranteed there has been some sort of conversations in the last year of some kind, some sort of meaningful conversations. Hopefully they've been helpful and productive. Maybe you have found some sort of new communication channels. You know, maybe you have found other ways to bring in information. You know, maybe that's finding new podcasts or new YouTube channels or new books or new resources or learning something. These are all good things for us to think about here at the beginning of the week. So that happens about 4:00 p.m. Eastern time, and then Mercury is going to move into the sign of Cancer about 7 p.m. Eastern time. Mercury will be in Cancer until June 26th, so we have about 3 weeks here. And this is the place of the moon. Like we mentioned with Jupiter moving into Cancer, this is the place of life. This is the place where physical life is created. It is deeply connected to the feminine source, to the moon, to the goddess energy. So what does that mean, and how does that play out? It can be a very warm, nurturing, caring place. It can be very sensitive to the mental needs. With Mercury in the sign of Cancer, I think about having an awareness of mental health and the mental load that we either are able to or unable to carry. There can be an intuitive emotional connection there. So we can be empathetic towards not only ourselves, but also to others through this connection. Really feeling your thoughts. So it's important to care for the words that we say during this time. And it's a good time to lend to your own mental sphere in a gentle way. You know, speaking up for those who might not be able to speak for themselves is a theme that can come up with Mercury in the sign of Cancer. We can have advocacy here. And it may be that as Mercury comes into more visibility, as it moves further away from the sun, then we might feel a growing desire to create a safe space, to have all of these things be felt, and really to be held in quite a way. So all of the lunar themes can come up when Mercury is in the sign of Cancer, the place of the moon. So the physical life, our health, our energetic or physical body, not only just our own, but also themes of origin, where we've come from. So our ancestry, our childhood, being the place that we come from, our memories, our experiences, the ones that are conscious and maybe unconscious or subconscious in different ways, as well as the dream world can come into play here. So all of those different memory bodies, they're all parts of the connections through lunar themes here. Connections and communications with feminine figures in our lives, that can be women, children, mothers, sisters, friends, or any strong feminine energy within your life. And a real focus on caring for others and caring for the vulnerable mentally and communicatively in some way. These are all possibilities over the next few weeks here as Mercury's in the sign of Cancer. That Scorpio moon is going to take us right into Monday, June 9th. The moon will make a couple aspects before moving into the sign of Sagittarius about 11 a.m. Eastern time, and we have a few aspects that are happening this day as well. Venus makes a square to Pluto. Mentioned in last week's video that this is an aspect that started building as soon as Venus moved into the sign of Taurus last Friday. When Venus makes a square to Pluto, there can be a very deep, investigative, and possibly transformative look at whatever is at hand here. Within the square, it's probably not without difficulty, but there can be a big shift or transformation or some sort of empowering energy that can come through here. Hopefully, this transit coming through is not necessarily taking us into crisis mode. It could, but definitely not super easy and flowing. The squares, they challenge us to find a new way and to do something a little bit different. So within this square, things are going to come up from the shadows here. So what hides in the shadows that steals your peace? What are things that maybe hold you back or limit you in some way that maybe you've realized are there, but you try to ignore them or you try to just brush them off? Could be things that you're just totally unaware of and then they come to your consciousness, but wondering what is keeping our peace and what is stealing our peace. Venus in the sign of Taurus wants peace, wants comfort, and wants good vibes. So how can we restore that? What is prohibiting or blocking your path to peace in some sort of way? What should metaphorically be cleaned out of the closet this week? Is there anything that is really just holding you back in some sort of way? Taurus is a very stick-to-it sign. It's willing to put in the work as long as it can see where the benefit and the joy and the cohesion is going to come. So Venus will be willing to go into that literal or metaphorical underworld and dig into those shadows in order to put in the work to bring forward the peace here. You know, Venus and Taurus is usually looking for stability, cohesion, and a place of balance. And that's the motivation. That's the motivation with Venus in the sign of Taurus here. So this could be a very deeply empowering moment, possibly, of taking our power back in some sort of way or seeing the path and the challenges that are in front of us to be able to move into that type of energy. And at the same time, we have a square between Mercury and Saturn coming through. These squares coming through, all of these squares on the same day, they're challenging us to see a different perspective or to move in a different way. So Mercury making a square to Saturn can bring forward mental challenges. Saturn is probably asking Mercury to focus and requesting Mercury to maybe be a little bit more objective than Mercury in the sign of Cancer really wants to be. Saturn in the sign of Aries now, and Aries is very individualistic, very pioneering, going out solo, going out on its own. Cancer is much more tribe focused, not necessarily large group, can be, but that intimately connected group, family, or cultural type setting is very much where Cancer lies, where Aries is much more solo, going out on its own and doing its own thing. So one sign wants to assert its will and the other wants to feel into the situation. So that's the difference of the environment that these two are in, and the mental conflict that could be coming up along with this. Feelings of not being able to speak up for ourselves or speak in the way that we want to with Mercury and Saturn coming into a square, feelings of restrictions here within the square as well, but also both of these planets are coming into the square at 1 degree of their respective signs. So both of them are coming into new territory and on a new journey. And new territory means new experiences. New experiences mean a place for us to grow from. Remember that squares challenge us to bring in new perspectives, challenges us to grow within a way. So it's almost as if the square is showing us that we have all of this potential in front of us. You're sitting here at 1 degree of the sign right now. There are 29 degrees. So think about how much more space there is to go forward within the sign rather than moving backward. It shows a symbolic picture of a journey to me and an ability to overcome and to be able to move forward. So, to overcome the challenges and face the difficulties where we are going, there has to be a little work to put in. But Venus is in the sign of Taurus. She wants peace, she wants cohesion, but she's willing to work for it and stick with it if she has to. So however however that makes sense for you and works out for you, where can you find some growth coming through here? Just after that square to Saturn, the square to Saturn from Mercury comes through at like 6:30 a.m. Eastern time. Just before 7 p.m. Eastern time that day, Mercury comes into the square with Neptune. So we have all of this simultaneous energy happening here with Mercury this week. And really the times are just to show you how close they are happening in their moment of exactness. You can think of all of these aspects just really happening simultaneously, or just kind of boom, 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 one after another here. So we get the square to Saturn, we get the square to Neptune as Mercury moves into the 2nd degree here. Challenge is to disconnect or to let go in order to possibly be able to reconnect. Neptune is a sign, or is a planet that sometimes in order to fully concentrate or fully move into whatever the Neptunian energy is, it has to pull us away from other things. It can intoxicate us with one thing so much that we totally lose track of everything else that is around us. That is the way that Neptune works. So, wondering what is it that you need to let go of in order to reconnect to some sort of individualist purpose, or to be able to reconnect your mind or reorganize your mind, or step back, take a deep breath in some way to be able to move forward today. The transits today could have us taking a hard look at specific things within our lives, and Neptune is not always the most clear, and Saturn can be very straightforward, very black and white, almost feeling a little bit overbearing in some ways here. Neptune can be foggy, can be nebulous, can be hard to pinpoint, and Saturn can almost be the opposite. It can be the finger that points directly towards something. No, this is exactly what you need to look at, where Neptune might just kind of give you a broad beating around the bush idea of exactly where the focus is here. So here, the challenges of our own willful action, Neptune in the sign of Aries, and the emotional mind, Mercury in the sign of Cancer, can be coming up here. So weighing out what we want to move forward with versus how that's going to affect everybody else. Or are you still going to be able to take care of the things at home mentally while you are out pioneering, moving down your own path in some sort of way? Just quick little examples of how that could be playing out here. Perhaps the challenges here could be taking our own stance and our own autonomy, and staying with it strong within our own energy while still being empathetic towards others. So staying true to ourselves while still thinking about others and being considerate at the same time here. Perhaps an inspiration, Neptune is a very inspiring planet, can come from that, and then we can create something strong yet emotionally connected at the same time here, looking through these two planets. And this is also the day that Jupiter ingresses into the sign of Cancer. So like we mentioned, this is the place of exaltation. It's a high or elevated place. So basically Jupiter does really well in the sign of Cancer. And that is because the qualities of Jupiter that are of abundance and expansion, of proliferation, of growth, they mesh really, really well with the place of physical birth. Think of the proliferation of cells as new life is growing and dividing, and all of a sudden you get a new life. It's like the patterns and the movements of the moon. Cancer is the place of the moon. So think about how the moon, it starts out in the dark moon, and then it slowly grows just into a full moon, just like the gestation of a baby within the womb here. So this is part of the rationale between Jupiter and the sign of Cancer. Abundance, blessings, and progress in the Cancer area of our chart, as well as the lunar themes here, can happen with Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. So this is a year-long transit. This is going to take us through June of 2026. And it's a year-long transit of Jupiter being in the place of the moon before moving into the place of the sun. So I think that's an interesting symbolism for us to meditate on here as we're looking forward into the next couple years here. it's almost as if we have this period of Jupiter turning inward or having this centrally located energy kind of around growth and creating a safe space for growth before shining outward as Jupiter moves into the sign of Leo next year in 2026. So just kind of laying that path out. It feels like growing our own light in some sort of way before putting it on display. So those are things that you can kind of contemplate and feel into and just see how that feels for you. So meditations for the path for the next couple years laid out there. Meanwhile, as Jupiter moves into the sign of Cancer, the moon is going to be in Jupiter's sign of Sagittarius, setting up for the full moon that we have coming through this week. Feels like a very symbolic nod to the growth ability that Jupiter in the sign of Cancer has here to be able to create life, to be able to create abundance, and be able to create blessings for us here. You know, Mars has retrograded through the sign of Cancer earlier this year, so there's lots of people, depending on where Cancer falls within your own chart, that the Cancer house has just been difficult for many different reasons. So Jupiter coming through here after that retrograde should feel very soothing, should feel like some blessings coming into an area where maybe there's been a little difficulty or a little bit of strife here. And as Jupiter makes its way into Cancer, it's going to open up the Jupiter-Saturn square that is going to come into exactness a little bit later on. And this is a cycle that started in December of 2020 when these two planets came into a conjunction. So something that you can contemplate on here is what was initiated around that time, the end of 2020 into the beginning of 2021. What were the seeds that were being planted? This conjunction happened in Capricorn and Aquarius, so you can look at those houses. And there was an exact contact over both of those signs there, so really both houses are in play. And for many people, it was a pretty powerful seeding moment. So I bet you many people will have something that they can come up with. We had, at the end of 2020, we had Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto all in the sign of Capricorn coming together. So strong Capricornian energy. I'm sure there's something that you can think up here. When you have Jupiter and Saturn coming together in any sort of transfiguration, there is shifts that can be structurally shifting or paradigm shifting in some sort of way. Looking at the overarching frameworks and the structures and the foundations in our lives, and see what has been building. Things that have been building for a little while here, almost 5 years, the foundation's laid. Now we're coming into the square, so now we're coming into that individuation phase. It's kind of like the first quarter moon of a lunar phase. The seeds that were planted, you're now maybe just starting to be able to see where the path is and what these planets are, what they're working on. It was real ending and beginning energy at the end of 2020 with these two planets coming into contact at the 29th degree of Capricorn. Now they're coming into the square in early degrees. So it's almost as if there was the ending, and now we're in the place where we are building. And the seeds that were sown, you're now able to start being able to see the pathway there for them. So we'll definitely talk more about this a little bit later on this week, but just know that that square is coming through the whole week here, really. So that is what we have going on Monday. And then on Tuesday, we have that Sagittarius moon all day. We have no exact aspects that are coming through this day. Still the moon in the sign of Sag, making its way towards the full moon that we have on Wednesday. So we move into Wednesday, June 11th, and that is where we have our full moon at 20 degrees of Sagittarius coming through just before 4 about 3:45 a.m. Eastern time here. The Moon will make a couple other aspects that you can see here throughout the day, but really the full moon is our big thing that we have coming through this week. So the Sagittarius full moon with the sun in the sign of Gemini, expanding beyond the details. Gemini is about the details. It's about pulling things apart and understanding the small components, right? Wanting to know and understand why. Sagittarius is not so worried about why for the little things, but why for the big things. Looking at the big picture here. The new moon that we just had a couple weeks ago came through with a new start for Mercury, the ruler of the sun, the place of Gemini. The full moon here, the ruler of that, the sign of Sagittarius, comes with a fresh start for Jupiter. So this lunar cycle feels like a nice fresh start in a couple different ways. We see it in the new moon, we see it in the full moon here. Also, the movement for both of these signs, or for both of these planets, have been from a difficult sign to a little bit more easy sign. Mercury, fresh start, was within its sign that it rules of Gemini, and the fresh start for Jupiter is in the sign of Cancer, exaltation here. So it's like these planets are getting a new fresh start in an elevated place, or a place where they're able to do very well here. So expanding beyond the horizons, climbing new heights, exploring philosophical and experiential horizons, and looking for new experiences and new things. Sagittarius is a fire sign that wants to jump right in, but it's also very philosophical. It's the Jupiter sign. There is morality, there is an ethical side with Jupiter being the ruler. There is a hopeful, exuberant quality to Sagittarius, and the expanding qualities of Jupiter can really be on display here with the full moon coming through. There's also something to be said about the square to the nodes from the full moon here. So there can be there's a history and there's a push and a pull here with the full moon. There's always a push and a pull with the full moon because you have the sun and moon in opposition. But the history and the extra push and pull with the nodes kind of amplifies that here a little bit. So this may connect to what's been building within the Jupiter-Saturn interaction that we're talking about because of the structural framework, paradigmatic shifts that can come along with it because of the nodes tending towards the path that we're on, what we're moving away from, what we're moving towards. All of those things tend to intertwine within our lives here some way. So the sun is tending towards the north node, being at the north bending of the nodes, pulling us pulling us purposely towards the future and what feels like the future, what feels like we should be going towards. And the moon is tending towards the south node. So it's tending towards the place of release or what no longer serves us. So I'm wondering about the symbolism of releasing from the material world, the moon representing the physical world and this incarnate life and the fluctuations of the material world, and pulling us and how we can release from the physical world to pull towards something a little more infinite, something that is a little bit more consistent. So whether you call that God, source, your own higher self, whatever that divine pull is towards you, wondering how we can have that coming into this full moon here. Sometimes there's circumstances within this physical world that hold us back or inhibit us in some way. And sometimes we can't necessarily move beyond those, but sometimes we can. So with Sagittarius's looking beyond the horizons and its broad spectrum viewpoint that it has, I'm wondering if we can see a bigger picture to be able to move beyond those physical challenges of the earthly world, to be able to move towards the sun, move towards the solar qualities, move towards that which is unchanging, that which is the truth, whatever the truth may be for you. how can we expand our horizons and do it with a little bit of optimism here at the same time? Very, very cool and interesting lunar cycle that we have coming through here with the new moon and the full moon both. We also have Venus making a sextile to Mercury, all of these Mercury aspects that we have going on this week. Lots of Mercury things going on this month in general. This is a helpful communication between our mind and our desires here. With Mercury being so intimately tied to the lunar cycle, both the new moon and the full moon, with Mercury being so intimately tied to this lunar cycle through both the new moon and the full moon as the ruler of the sun, Venus may give Mercury a gentle way of creating cohesion here, bringing balance and harmony, a way in which independent components can work together to create that nurturing mental Mercury environment in the sign of Cancer. So that nurturing environment, Cancer. This can be a quick, subtle transit, but it can be really powerful as it's a staple of the full moon here. So that sextile to Mercury from Venus also just gives an extra little nod at that possible overcoming energy. So going back to what I said about releasing from the physical world and then moving towards that unchanging divine energy, whatever it is that is for you, or it can even just be, it doesn't have to be reaching towards like some sort of universal energy. It can be reaching into our own power, reaching into our own purpose, reaching into our own soul and our own drive and our own ambition, whatever drives you. So that is what we have coming through on Wednesday. Capricorn moon will take us right into Thursday, June 12th. We don't have any exact aspects that are going on this day, so just following the moon around, making a couple squares and an opposition here as well. As we move into Friday, June 13th, we have that Capricorn moon still holding still for us here, and this is where the sun comes into that exact square of the moons there. So that continuation height of the pole towards that north node energy, the illumination and the spotlight. When the sun is in square to the nodes, especially at the north bending or moving, tending towards the north node, our power, our purpose, and our perceived path can come into focus, and there can be an illumination on that. We may feel inclined to move in ways that feel supportive of where we want to go, and it can be motivating, but also there's a square, so there's work there. So we can be motivated to step in the ways that are going to illuminate our path or feel like they're going to take us down the path that we are trying to go down. The sun is still interacting with the south node, even though the tendency is towards the north node. There's a square there to both. So one representing increase, one representing decrease, and they're always in opposition. So there's a built-in tension between what pulls us towards something and then what we are kind of releasing away from. They both want to continually complete their action. So one wants to continually bring things in and one wants to continually release. Neither one of those are sustainable forever, so there has to be a bit of a balance here, and that can be part of the challenge with the square to the nodes coming through here from the sun and really from the full moon that we have. So that is what we have coming through on Friday, and that Capricorn moon will take us right into Saturday, June 14th. Eventually the moon will move into the sign of Aquarius, and there's a couple lunar aspects that are going on there. We also have Mars making a square to Uranus. This also allows us to break free from something, do something a little bit different, and step in a little bit different way that maybe has been brought up by the squares that we have coming up this week. So the opportunity to act bravely, and there's a challenge to break away from ideals or norms or things that are not working for us very well. There can be a rebellious and unexpected energy. So things can move quickly. This is a day to maybe just take a little extra care that we aren't, we don't have any sort of little accidents or anything like that that are happening. But really the squares are, we have all these squares coming through this week, right? And they're challenging us to move in a different way. Last week we had sextiles, this week we have squares. And then we have Jupiter making that exact square to Saturn this day. So we talked a little about that already. So the challenges of expansion and contraction with these two planets, both of them in their own way represent systems, the interconnectedness of all things in the ways that they work independently but cooperatively too, right? At least ideally they can work on their own and work together here. Saturn is the foundations, the frameworks, and the weighty dialed in focus within our lives here. You have to have a plan to create a good system. You have to have somewhere a solid base to be able to go from. So ideally in all systems there is a solid foundation that the system is built upon. But at the same time you also need Jupiterian qualities within systems too, right? You need to be able to dream, you need to have the desire to move beyond, you have to have some sort of vision or some sort of ideal that you are moving towards. You need ideals and you need beliefs that will create cohesivism, and ideally a systematic formation that allows all parts to participate within their own way, very Jupiterian. Values, beliefs, morals, ethics, systems that uphold or ideally uphold these things for all. These are ideal systems, right? We know a lot of them will fall short of ideals, but this is ideally how it would work. So often we fall short of the ideals or we outgrow them, and maybe it's just time to shift the mindset a little bit or update the system or maybe even replace it with a new one here. So the squares are challenging us to look at systems and see what sort of tweaks need to be made. So maybe if we look at the seeds that were planted in December of 2020, there's a process that's been building very, very slowly, right? Like we said, this is like 5 years now that we're talking, but there's a picture that is coming into play here. There is a story that has been building itself. Here within the square, where do you see the challenges that you need to overcome? What has been blocking you from really creating those foundations and that basis that Jupiter and Saturn have been working on in your own life? I think it's interesting that these two planets will expand into the trine later on this year as Saturn retrogrades back into the sign of Pisces. So while there's squares that challenge us now, I suspect that for many of us there will be growth that will come from it that we will be able to see by later on in this year. So what is and what isn't working for you right now? Just broad picture thinking. Is your perspective changing in some sort of way? What have you learned with regards to this shift through the mindset here? And where have you seen the yeses showing up in your life, and where have you seen the no's showing up in your life? Yes being Jupiter, no being Saturn. How are those two yeses, the yes and the no, how are they either working together or not working together? Good things to contemplate on this week. And with the two coming together, square and then trine later on this year, how can we find a way to maybe finally be able to work those two together? These are good contemplations as we round out the week here. So we have a lot that was going on here this week, lots of different energies to contemplate on. We have a really cool full moon that is coming through. The new moon was really, really cool too. I talked a lot about that. If you want to refresh yourself on that, you could go back to the video from a couple weeks ago. But that is what we have here for this week. So reminder to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so that way you don't miss the weekly videos. We have live meditations Sunday nights, so we have a really good system to kind of set up for the astrology of the week, where on Fridays we have an intention that is released based on the astrology of the upcoming week. And then Saturday, the weekly video comes out, and then on Sunday we meet together in a meditative space and enter into the week together. So really good ways to set up for the week astrologically. So I will see you back here next week for our next weekly video, and I will see you Sunday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time for our live meditation. I hope everybody has a wonderful week with all of this energy we have going on.